Good morning and welcome to this April 24th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting. We have presentations going over the budget. I do not have any opening remarks. Dr. Watts, do you have any opening remarks?
I do not. Let's jump
Okay.
in.
I would like to first have a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Agenda passes. We need to approve our minutes from the March 2024 meeting. Motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Minutes pass. Mr. Jackson, go on ahead with the FY25 budget development process. Thank you, sir.
All right, good morning, everyone. The presentation you have before you, for at least for the board members, is an updated presentation from the one we did at the board retreat. So we have a number of presenters that are going to come before you. So we're going to start with our opening remarks with our superintendent, I believe.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Again, as stated, this is a part of an iterative process. You all got your first look at this budget proposal at the March 27th, I believe it was, retreat. This is another iteration and an update to that. Our goals and objectives is for the board and our community to understand the influential factors that drive the budget development process. We want you to also have transparency into the revenue and expenditures and understand what our margins are for decision-making. Our team has advanced some priorities that align with the strategic plan that we think will continue to move our district together in a productive and successful way. And then last, but certainly not least, is, again, this is collaborative, it's iterative, it evolves, and the feedback that we hear from the board and the community helps drive some of the decision-making and the path forward. So those are our goals. As you'll see on the next slide, some of the influential factors as we try to balance the budget. Obviously, there are things that are beyond our control in many cases, such as the local and state economic landscape, the increased cost of just simply sustaining operations and unfunded state mandates. And there are things that also press on the balancing process that are a little bit more within our control. And those things include alignment to the strategic plan. Obviously, we're using multiple data sources, both quantitative and qualitative, historical budget investments, and board, parent, and community engagement. So we're trying to take into account all of those things. As you look at the development process, that yellow part, again, continues to be highlighted because we want this to be collaborative and evolving. But you can kind of get from this particular slide historically where we've been in this project in the months of February and March. In April, which is where we are today, one of the goals that we had based on this committee's feedback was to deliver you an initial draft budget earlier. And we are on track to do that. Today will be your first look at that particular budget. But we want feedback. This is preliminary and it's in draft form. As you can see for May, it continues to be iterative. We will reconcile the more we learn from the state, the more we learn about our revenue sources, and then we will move into the month of June, which will include several public hearings for additional feedback. Here is some just additional information. Again, I continue to emphasize the desire to have community feedback. But we have begun that process already with the launch of a survey. I believe today's the last day for that survey.
Yes.
So we hope people are taking advantage of that opportunity. We do have a scheduled public hearing on May 8th as well as May 15th. We hope we will have a large turnout for folks to come and share their perspectives. And then moving into June 12th, we'll have our public hearing around the millage rate. And June 20th, another couple of options for a millage rate public hearing. And with that, I'll turn it over to, back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. As we get into the projection enrollment for next year, you can see there's a small decline for our projected enrollment. Historically, we would do our projections based upon the last 5-year history of enrollment, looking at trends. The budget office does the initial projections, share them with the site administrators, the school principals, because they are more aware of what's going on in their neighborhoods. So in the scheme of things, as far as the total district, the enrollment is going down a little bit, but we do have some schools, because of our transient population, where parents move from one side of the county to the other side, where we make adjustments at particular school sites. But in the actual budget document, the budget preliminary pamphlet, a book that we put together, you'll see some of the history of the enrollment in that document. One of the other things that we adjusted since the last presentation was the projected revenues. We were able to get some numbers from the Department of Education as far as state revenue. That number went down, I believe, just a little bit, a couple of $1 million. So we were pretty much close to our projected amount. But the projected increase in revenue for next school year, is right at $48.9 million, with most of that coming from property taxes. On this particular slide, we try to highlight some of the major changes to the general fund. An increase of $37 million. Most of it is related to positions and salaries. You can see the bus driver pay increase. We make an adjustment there to change them from one grade to a higher grade. We have some district program expansions, which are some of the departmental requests. We have some program improvements that will add about 12 positions. With the district reorganization plan that I believe that has been presented to the board, we will save about $861,000. There are some other operating expenses, which include utilities. One thing we did not have in the last presentation, we will be opening the addition of the Pulaski K-8, so we had to add in $500,000 for startup funds for that K-8, that middle grade addition to the school. So that pays for some equipment, library and media materials, and so on. Something else that was not in the original presentation, we're considering adding secondary counselors. Right now, there's a plan to add 32 counselors, secondary counselors. That's at the K-8 schools, the middle schools, and the high schools. We talked previously about moving positions from the American Recovery Program. There are about 25 positions there. We also talked about GNETS programs, where we lost the state and federal funding there. That program will cost us about $3.3 million. The reduction, yes.
On the GNETs, that's because the state and federal funding is just no longer there to get those grants, right?
Correct.
Correct, okay. I just didn't want it to sound like we lost, it's just not available to even try to get anymore.
Correct.
Yeah,
You're
so
right.
then we have to bring that in-house, thank you.
Yeah, right, you're right. I don't want it to sound like we lost the grants. It's just not available anymore. The FY24 use of fund balance, those are one-time expenditures that we had in the budget for the current year, which includes the letters training. That was a one-time payment. We paid that contract for, I believe, 2 or 3 years in advance. So that will come out. We had an amount in there for the local portion where we matched the governor's supplement that was given earlier. And the other difference is the amount that we use for textbooks. For example, it's shown in the budget as a reduction, but say, for instance, for example, in FY24, we're spending about $10 million on textbooks, but for FY25, we're only spending $4 million toward the purchase. So it shows a reduction of the $6 million. But in the actual budget, we have to reduce that line by $6 million. We have some QBE and enrollment staffing projections, and those are based really upon what we earn from the state for QBE, and the enrollment staffing is based upon the current enrollment, additional staff that's needed at the schools. Even though the total enrollment is not going up district-wide, if it changes at a particular school, then we have to adjust the enrollment for that particular school. So the staffing is based on a per-school basis, per grade, and not district-wide. We also calculated a cost of living staff increase. That's going to cost about $14.5 million, which also include a one-time payment for those staff members that are at the top. No, excuse me. That's for the cost of living. That matches the $2,500 state increase that the governor imposed for teachers. The years of service increase is what I was referring to. That includes a one-time payment for those staff members that are at the top of their scale. There's a handful of those that have reached the top of their scales, years of service, but we try to compensate them even though they don't get that years of service step, which may be 3% for some people. We try to recognize their years of service and their contributions to the district and give them a one-time payment. Then previously we talked about the increase for the state health insurance. Yes, ma'am.
Before you go any further, first of all, I really want to commend us that we did that cost of living increase for those employees at the top of the scale. I think that was very important and very commendable that we took care of that. If I wanted to know which of these items most affected the classroom, things like the addition of secondary counselors, those affect the children dramatically. What would you say other than the counselors most immediately affect the children? I'm thinking everything that helps teachers, of course, then helps our students. But I would think the addition of those secondary counselors is critical and something that, we really need to publicize that we're doing. The GNET situation, that's immediately affecting children. I'm trying to prioritize,
Okay.
what gets us closest to the classroom, because that's the criticism I hear the most, that,
And that may show up on our future slides.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just waiting
As
for
we go
that.
through the other slides, we try to tie these to the strategic plan, and we get into where they fall and who they affect.
Okay, all right. As much as possible that we can publicize that.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it will really help us, because a lot of the public doesn't seem to understand that.
Indeed.
Ms. Grabowski?
Good morning. You said the years of service, step increase was a one-time, but won't we have that every year?
No, I was saying what's included in that includes the regular staff, their years of service step. But
Right.
what's also included in that number is about, I think it's like 900,000 for a group of employees or a few hundred employees that are at the top of the scale.
Right,
So-
but won't we have new employees moving to the top of the scale each year?
Yes.
Yes.
It's recurring.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah,
because
we
you
try to-
mentioned it was a
yeah.
one-time cost, but it would really be a recurring cost, because every year we would have some new employees hit that cap
Yes.
unless we change something
that's correct.
policy-wise.
That's correct. Now, we would have to include that cost or consider including that calculation every year.
Okay, and you said about 900,000 of that is for those that are capped at the top?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
650?
650, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then I would ask that when we look back at that, that's the last page of the actual preliminary budget, that it does say one time, so we need to actually, if that's going to be a reoccurring, change that verbiage.
Yes.
Do we have to remember to do that, or?
We can include it. We haven't always done that. We started a few years ago at the direction of Dr. Levette. Is Ramon? Ramon's not here. I want to say we maybe started 3 or 4 years ago. We haven't always done that, but we wanted to consider those folks. I know we had some discussion about why our pay scale stopped, but that was our solution to that we do recognize them and give them something. And where those employees would just not get anything just because they're the senior employees.
Mr. Jackson, what I'm saying is, it's recurring automatically, or it's recurring only if we remember to say, Mr. Jackson, let's
At the board direction, we can calculate that cost every year, because every year it could be different people. You will have some people retire, but you would have new people that would be added to the list. So at the board direction, we can include that cost every year.
Couple of questions. On the, and here I go using an acronym, on our ARP, when does that stop
The actual grant ends September 30th of this year.
of this year? Okay. All right. And regarding the bus driver pay grade increase, and I'm sure you've shared this with us before and I've forgotten. What was that increase?
All of it, we're all just getting super excited
I'm
this morning.
sorry. I'm
We're
sorry.
We're like,
Oh my
hey,
God.
it's okay. I like
so we
to,
did
yeah.
that.
Okay, sorry.
All right.
He made some pretty slides that say it.
Okay, and one more, and it
Yes,
also
sir.
may be coming up. The secondary counselors, are these mental health counselors?
So you'll get a little bit more information, but
All
that
right.
has been added based on conversations that we had at the retreat and some of the other conversations we've had about the well-being of our students. So that is
good.
probably the newest addition to this.
Yeah.
Dr. Howard Hall, but if
Publicize
it's on a
that.
slide coming up,
And I think that is correct. That's probably the only new thing we
Yeah.
added since the retreat.
That's wonderful.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good morning. The years of service step increase, do you see an influx of step increases as teachers obtain higher education? Do they notify you all?
That's not considered a years of step. Once they get advanced degrees,
I know,
we
that's
make
what I'm saying.
adjustments for that,
Is
right?
there separate, to determine, those that will be obtaining those degrees and they get, of course, be at another level?
Right.
How do you all figure out what to set aside for that, for those employees?
As far as the set aside, we actually don't. We just run a snapshot at a particular time of the year, normally around the 1st of March, 1st of April, because by that time, most of them have already had their, made their adjustments for their additional certifications. So we really don't budget for changes in between, I guess, March 1st and throughout the year. So we take a snapshot of what they have, where they are at March 1st.
Because every month we see it,
Yeah, every month,
increases.
you're right. Depending upon when they finish school, so at the end of probably every semester, you could have some changes there. Yes, ma'am. Here we talk a little bit about just a breakdown of what we project for the COLA increase. As you can see, about $5.9 million of that is funded by the local district, by local funds. $9 million is supported by QBE and state funding. As we look at the health benefits, this is another slide we shared before. We showed a calculation of how we got to the 10.9 increase, $10.4 million increase for state health insurance. Of that, we were projected to get $5.1 million from the state, having a local impact of about $5.3 million that we pay for the portion of employees that we fund locally. This particular slide is it's more for information and really for the public, just to remind them of our entire budget. This is a snapshot of the FY24 budget. That 84% plus of our budget is in salaries and benefits. Then you look at some of the other major items that are in there, the utilities, the operating transfers for charter schools, and that operating transfer is actually what these charter schools earn from their QBE money, along with a portion of the local taxes that they receive, building maintenance, textbooks and supplies, equipment, building insurance, and software purchases. Dr. Watts, I think this.
Given the limited margins we have with things that are coming down the pike that we have to do, such as the state mandates, the insurance, increase in compensation, we looked at just the limited amount of money that we actually have decision-making power over. And we came up with 3 different pathways we could take. Path 1 is really kind of looking at holding even and not advancing a lot of additional projects or program improvements, really drilling down on the things that we have identified as priorities for this year and focus on execution versus adding new things. The other pathway we could take is if we wanted to add new things, but we don't want to add additional cost or expenditures to the budget, we could reduce some of the things that we're doing now and reallocate those expenditures to new ideas that may be generated by either the public or the board. And then the third pathway we could potentially go down is if we wanted to blue sky think and do all the things that we feel are important. To do that, we would have to look at ways to increase our revenue. And a millage rate increase would have to be considered. We would have to seek grant funding, or the enrollment would have to increase. Those are the only 3 ways to generate more revenue. Our team has decided the path that we are pursuing right now is, instead of asking for a lot of new funding, we want to maintain and enhance the investments that we've already made and really focus on optimizing execution. So that is the pathway that we are pursuing in this recommendation that we're providing to the board. Given that, we looked at our strategic plan, obviously, that you all have seen, and we said, where are the areas where we have made investments that we want to maintain, and where do we want to bolster those investments? And so the strategic plan was the starting place for that conversation, and you can see those priority objectives here on the screen. And those investments and our priorities really focus on hitting all 4 areas, as you will hear momentarily again, a focus on students. When the question was asked, how does this impact the classroom? How does our budget impact the classroom? Obviously, we want to focus on students. We want to continue to pursue our North Star around literacy. We want to bolster support in special education and our emerging English-speaking students and families. And we want to continue to focus on workforce development, given where we are in our community. We also chose to look deeply at community engagement. We have a strong community engagement team, but we need to strengthen that given the forward movement of the district. We cannot advance our district without focusing on salary and benefits for our employees. Our talent is really the main bloodline to how we do our work. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we're being good stewards and we're maintaining our buildings. Our buildings operate with efficiency and effectiveness. So you'll see some recommendations around that, as well as our technology work in the district. So given that, we'll transition. We won't spend as much time on these as we did at the board retreat, but we did want the public and the board to see where right now we are as it relates to the priorities that we are advancing for your input and feedback.
So we'll start with.
Ms. Hall?
Dr. Watts, is there some way that we could get a list of examples so that if I wanted to speak to this publicly, I would be able to show, for instance, the Science of Reading program training and execution? That's going to blah, 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 blah.
I think you're going to see that
Oh.
in the next slide.
The next coming slides. Again, if we all would wait to see all the slides, we'll get all our answers, I think. Ms. Ball Oliver, were you?
So we'll start with strategic priority students, advanced proficiency in literacy and numeracy through high-quality instruction and support for diverse learners. Our staffing enhancements, which would be new positions, would be the 27 ESOL positions, And that would be for our students, English as a second language, those learners. Remember that we are no longer serving students in hubs, but we're committed to those students being served in their neighborhood schools, just as all of our other students are. As well as the 36 positions for our GNETS program. We will no longer be receiving that GNETS grant, and we will not be a part of GNETS. This will be a program for our most fragile learners that we will be assuming cost for. And then, of course, maintaining the commitment that was made last year as it relates to our 4 bilingual liaisons and our ESOL coordinator.
Mr. Moss?
Thank you. So, as I understand, how many languages do we have? I think we have over 21 different languages in our school system, correct?
Correct.
So these 4 bilingual liaisons, these will be people who are equipped in more than Spanish, correct?
That is the goal. They have hired 2, and both are equipped in Spanish, but they are interviewing for the others, looking for
I
different
just wanted
languages.
to make sure that, we're not putting everything in the Spanish basket when we have 21 different
Correct.
languages going on.
Correct.
So,
So moving on, continuing with students as our strategic priority, we're looking at our literacy effectiveness officer, our K-12 textbook adoption, and the 6 literacy specialists. And Ms. Hall, I think this speaks directly to your questions as it relates to implementation of the science of reading. And how will we measure that return on investment? The key performance indicators are to increase Lexile performance as measured by GMAS reading on grade level with a focus on 3rd grade. And then, of course, increasing the percentage of students that are demonstrating typical or high growth on GMAS, English language arts, and mathematics. And this would be measured by the Student Growth Percentile Report. And increasing the percentage of students that are demonstrating typical or high growth on GMAS in English language arts and mathematics for our English language learners and for our students with disabilities, so putting a key focus on those 2 subgroups. Strategic priority, provide high-quality support for whole child development as it relates to our students. This is where you see the addition of the counselor's position, 32 secondary counselors. Those would be new positions. And then maintaining the 10 academic deans from the ARP funds, as well as the 3 wellness center counselors. And I think we might need to adjust that deans. All 10 of those are not academic.
Okay.
Ms. Hall and then Ms. Grabowski.
And after this, I'm going to be quiet.
I'm going to hold you
First of
to it.
all, how wonderful that we're adding 32 secondary counselors. That's going to be life transforming for our kids. That's a wonderful thing. I'm so proud to see that. I wanted to ask Ms. Bernadette, Ms. Ball Oliver, go over the academic dean and other behavioral deans. Go over that a little bit so that we're all explaining that to the public in the same way, what they do.
So we looked at when we started to utilize the dean positions, it began as behavioral for those students who were having challenges and those schools who were seeing challenges as it relates to student behaviors. And so those deans come together and they actually have a cohort of students that they work with, that they mentor, and that they support who have bubbled up as having some challenging behaviors that are impeding their ability to be successful academically, but they also work with the entire school population. And so they focus also on school climate and culture and helping our schools look at alternative consequences and lowering our suspension numbers specifically out-of-school suspension, expulsion, long-term suspension, as well as in-school suspension. So they work with a specific population of students as well as all students, but again, they have that specific cohort, and they serve as mentors for many of those students. The academic dean position was for the school that was looking to expand and improve how they support students academically. They had students that might be experiencing some different challenges, and so those deans work very similar to behavioral, but they focus solely on the academics because that school has different needs maybe than others.
If our IB kids needed support, do these deans cover the children we're trying to push, advance, accelerate, or just our students who are working below par?
So those deans actually serve twofold. They work with students who are experiencing maybe some academic challenges, but also with students who are accelerated and need additional support. And for example, our IB students also, they have the benefit in that case of academic coaches that are in that school.
Ms. Grabowski?
Thank you. First question, just piggybacking on the deans, you mentioned that one of the goals is to reduce the suspensions, which is fantastic. Do we have metrics available yet, now that deans have been in place, as to whether or not those suspensions have been reduced?
Yes, I can actually provide you with the information from the first semester report, as well as we did I don't want to say it was a really deep dive, but we have a return on investment that we did to analyze whether or not those deans were making an impact in the schools. And I actually have that report and can provide it to the superintendent to maybe provide as a superintendent's note.
That would be great, thank you. And then second question, the wellness center counselors, are those counselors for staff, students, both? What population will they be serving?
Both staff
Okay.
and students.
Okay, because I think it's important that we are providing that staff support from the counselor position as well. So I just want to make that clear and certainly appreciate and support that addition.
We got 15 slides and 26 minutes, so go.
So here you can see how we measure that return on investment, of course, by increasing student well-being as measured by our annual state climate survey, decreasing the student behavior referrals, specifically as measured by that weighted suspension rate at grades 6 through 12. Still work to be done in that area, so those deans are valuable. And then, of course, decreasing student absenteeism as measured by student records, and that would be a key focus of those counselors.
Moving along in your presentation to strategic priority number 2, stakeholders. What you see on the screen is representative of some of the things that we saw on the superintendent's 100-day plan. When she went on tour, we recognized a greater need for deeper reach and impact, particularly from our engagement side of the house. We've done a lot to bolster the communication work that we do, and those are everything from the notifications to parents, to our website, to our output, to our engagement with medias. One of the things we did recognize was there is a necessary need for direct engagement and direct outreach initiatives, and that falls on the side of the house that you see for one of the positions. And this comes as well as the superintendent's reorganization when she came in and recognized an area here where we really can invest and bolster the work that we're doing. It's not often where we talk about initiatives and programs going on that right behind it, we have a necessary need to communicate that. And some of our communities that we're going into, that we partner with, that we want to reach into and have that deep impact and engagement requires a bit of a different approach. So you see an executive director of engagement and outreach. We also have, as a position that has been, that's a new position there, one position, though, that we've had in the district that we're seeking to maintain and fall into this organizational structure is a parent and community engagement liaison. Those two are directly connected on the outreach side of the house. On the communication side, we have bolstered that by thoughtfully bringing in and creating a position of a communications director of brand and marketing. So this is another thing that we've talked about on a number of times with our district, and that is really the identity of Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools, and how strong is that brand and how well does it resonate within our community for what we stand for. So part of that is really the packaging on all of the things that we are talking about that oftentimes when we come together in board retreats and board meetings and other initiatives that we're doing administratively, that speak volumes to the experience, the educational experience. But how do we really put a bow on that and consistently over time stress the identity of our public school system? That's brand, and then there's a marketing component to that as well. The strategic plan that we've just went through and where we've reorganized much of these priorities is that roadmap that really gets us there as well. So these positions are directly aligned to that. You'll also see that we've added a video services specialist position. This is something that I'm very proud of over the years. We've been able to grow much of the work that we do on the communications side of the house in a visual sense and in a broadcast sense. You'll note that this room that we're in right now, we affectionately call it the Whitney Broadcast Center because we've been able to do a lot of live streaming. We've enhanced this facility for greater cameras and switcher and more of a broadcast component, and use it outside of the realm of regular board meetings for communication initiatives. And that video service specialist will play a big role in that, but we'll also be able to deploy that person out into the field and do some really compelling work to further drive home the reach and the impact of our communications effort. So these positions are, again, part of that reorg, and what you see on the screen really represents that that opportunity and pathway number one for this budget approach, which is maintaining these positions moving into FY25 so that we can really invest in the stakeholder engagement component of the work that we're already doing, but enhance it and improve it for greater reach and impact. And as Mr. Jackson moves the slide forward to talk about our KPIs, as we all know, we've gone through the tweaking and the enhancement of our current existing strategic plan. We've been able to really hone in on some measurable components of engagement that we can pull some data from, and all those positions and that investment in bolstering the department will play a role in meeting these KPIs for us so that we can measure how far and how great we're doing with our impact and engagement with our families. And let's face it, we all know that we serve multiple audiences as a school district of our size, from parents to business partners, to community organizations, to volunteers, to our faith-based community. We have a lot of audiences that we engage with and that we work with, and we're looking forward to putting these KPIs out there and having the team in there to have a positive impact on them.
Thank you. Mr. Moss?
Real quickly, I just want us to make sure, I'm looking at this budget, I'm just wanting to make sure that this budget allows us to hire the best. So that's, I'm going to leave that there.
I would reiterate that with the 32 counselors.
Yeah, yes.
Make sure that what we're putting out there will actually get 32.
Yes.
Yeah,
Real-
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Employees?
Yes, we were getting next into the employees. Most of the employee adjustments I pretty much talked about in the previous slide, but I do want to point out I think back to Ms. Hall's question, we put as a kind of a note reminder, this little hexagon that's to the left refers back to our strategic priorities. So as you're talking to folks, you can also refer to that strategic priority hexagon and which one it relates to. But for the cost of living adjustments, again, I covered all of them. We wanted to get into, I talked also about the adjustments for the longevity step and the cost of living. Just briefly wanted to talk about the bus drivers. At the beginning of the school year, and talking as if I'm Ramon right now, the beginning hourly rate was $18.67. As a part of ARP, we were able to include a $2 per hour supplement on top of their hourly rate. That was another main reason that drove us to make an adjustment for FY25. So for FY25, as we move the bus drivers up a grade, it changes the beginning hourly rate from $18.67 to $21.38 per hour. He also included a mean of $29.34 an hour, and the median hourly rate for an average bus driver is right at $29.86 per hour.
Out of that 29.8 million, I'm just trying to do some quick math. Are we getting about 15 of that from the state out of the QBE formula earnings and accrual, and then the transportation? Am I reading that properly or not? No, Miss Rosalind is saying no.
What was your question again?
Okay, so we've got a total there, 29.8 million. I'm trying to figure out how much of that is actually coming from new state funds versus how much of it is being driven by local funds. The bottom of the cost of living adjustment?
Oh, okay.
Go back,
I'm sorry.
yeah. The big, because transportation's a part of that, like, sorry. Yeah, the
okay,
benefits, the
okay.
step increase, the transportation, we're lumping that all together, which makes sense, 29.8 million. I'm just trying to figure out how much of that is Chatham County dollars funding that, or how much of it is from state allocation,
Of
or an increase in state
That's
allocation. I know
correct.
the state gave us a little extra on transportation this year.
The additional state revenue increase, that's where it's kind of referring to.
Transportation increase is coming up as 1.2.
Yeah, I see that on page 30, but then I see above it the QBE formula earning, but that is not included in these benefits and step increases, is that?
Correct. No.
Okay, so
No.
the vast majority of this is just,
Yes, and all of these additions we pay for locally.
Okay.
If that's your question, yes.
yeah, kind of thought that, I just like having it said.
Yes. I'll follow you now. And their key performance indicators is decrease the number of teacher vacancies. That's always been a challenge the last few years. Increase employee perceptions of being valued and appreciated. That has always been a key component, but as you, more and more as you deal, most of you that deal with the younger generation, all of them feel like they have value now. Maybe we didn't think that way, but they do now. And we also want to increase the retention of effective employees. Next, I'm going to have the director, Ms. Cooley, come up and talk about the rest of the slides.
Good morning. Just going through our preliminary budget for this next fiscal year. Our general fund is obviously our largest fund, which is our operating budget. And our largest revenue source for this fund is our property taxes, which is established by the millage rate. And our revenues that we anticipate receiving for fiscal year 25 is $614 million. Expenditures of $625 million. Debt service is obviously our money that is to pay for our debt. Our capital projects are funds used to account for our financial resources that we use for the acquisition or construction of major capital projects, improving them. Our sources for this is our eSplosh, our penny sales tax revenue, state capital outlay grants and earned interest, and our capital projects for next year are $131 million for revenues and expenditures. Our next funds that we have listed are our special revenue funds. Some of the major ones are our Title I, which is a program that ensures all children have a fair, equal, and significant opportunity to obtain a high-quality education. It's $28 million on expenditures and revenues projected. Our federal special education is federally funded programs to provide appropriate public education for handicapped students up to the age of 21. We also have technical preparation funds in our Fund 406, which is special revenue funds that account for financial resources for grant-funded technical career and education initiatives, which we know is very important in today's society. Another big one that we've talked about, that Mr. Jackson talked about earlier, was Fund 448, our CARES 3 ARP fund. That was our emergency relief funds, and the big deal on that is we will lose those funds. Our last day of being able to use those funds is September 30th, 2024. So we are anticipating at the end of this year having about $18.4 million left to spend in the first three months. Is it 4 months? First 3 months of next year. And the rest of the funds are also listed here. Some of these special revenue funds on here are JROTC program. We use that to fund things such as our laundry, field trip supplies, and extra costs for JROTC. Our Department of Defense Fund 485 is to support our military students. Another one, the pre-K lottery fund on here. We're projecting that at 10.7. I do want to mention there is like one big thing that has affected pre-K for next year for us is this year we could currently have a class size of 22. Next year the maximum class size is 20. We have asked for, Mrs. Drought told me that she has applied to get more pre-K funding. We don't know if we will get that, but that means we cannot serve as many pre-K students next year if they do not allocate more resources for more teachers for the pre-K program. So I did want to mention that because when you look at the enrollment, we've kind of kept it level for next year, but the pre-K classes have gone down in size. We cannot put 22 in a classroom now, so that will affect our enrollment unless we obtain more funding from Bright from the Start for pre-K classes. And then at the bottom, Food Service Fund 600 is, of course, our food nutrition program at $33 million. Our internal service funds, that's the three that we have are the Fund 690, our workers' compensation, which is we account to establish accounts for self-insured workers' compensation claims, and then our unemployment compensation or for compensation claims for unemployment, and then our employee dental plan. We were in the past self-insured. For our employee dental plan, we went with a new company this year, and that is a fee service. So there is still some money for expenditures in there, which has been allocated to HR for recruitment for staff, such as teachers, recruitment or parapros or anybody that they need to recruit in HR. So that money has been set aside for them. And the next slide is just a graph of the preliminary expenditure budgets by fund type. As you can see, our general fund is the very largest one that makes up the majority, 71%. Capital projects, 15%. All of those special revenue funds we were just talking about are 14%, and our internal service funds are not, they're a little over 0%. And then this slide just shows our important dates that are coming up on our calendar, our public hearings and millage rate hearings, and these are the dates that we will be concentrating on in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. Moss?
Question on, hang on, let me find it. Education of homeless children, is that based on the number of identified homeless children we have?
I would want to defer that to Mrs. Ball Oliver.
So I do think that may have some bearing, but I'll get the exact formula from Ms. Hill for you to see how that's calculated. I can get that in a few.
Dr. Howard Hall and then Ms. Grabowski.
Yes, I know we don't have time to discuss it now, but I'd like to hear more conversation on how we're supplementing. You know, we're going with Path 1 to enhance investments, and we know that Title I is the largest grant that we get. That's a $28 million grant that we receive year after year after year. So in order to enhance our investment, I'd like to hear more conversation on what are we doing to supplement those priorities. As we know that, we talk about state funding most of the time, and I know that's because that's what we talk about. But we get an awful lot, a huge amount of federal funds, and you don't hear much conversation about it. And we need to really, I think, hone in on how we're supplementing those priorities. Not for all the schools, of course, because not all schools receive the funding, but many of the schools that are struggling receive that. So I just like to hear
We
more.
are planning to have a presentation later, couldn't get to it today, on some of our special revenue funds, but I agree. It's an important piece of the pie.
Ms. Grabowski?
On the pre-K, great to see the smaller class size for pre-K. Not great if we are not serving our students. We've talked a lot about the importance of that very early childhood education. So do we have a sense of whether or not we will be getting additional funding? And if not, is that something that we need to increase in our priorities to provide funding locally to make sure that we already are not serving all of our students that want to be in pre-K. So we don't need to go backwards. We need to go forward in serving as many students as we can.
Ms. Ball Oliver may know, I know Mrs. Drought told me that because I asked her, or did you ask for more since we are losing the numbers? And she said, yes, she had already, and this was well over a month ago when I talked to her, she had already applied to get more funding for that and was hopeful that it could happen. So she may know some
So
more
what
updated
typically has to happen is that we have to actually lobby the state and ask for an increase in the number of pre-K programs. So we have to identify location, and then we ask, can we add another program, which is what Ms. Drought was referring to. Of course, the state does not completely fund that program because as you know, we pay our pre-K teachers like we pay all of our other staff, and the state does not provide funding for that rate of pay, so we have to supplement that. In addition, we also have our 3-year-old programs that are not in any way, our pre-pre-K, that are not in any way funded by the state. And so we look to our business partners and grants to help supplement that. And we have been seeking additional funding, and we do plan to add another 3-year-old program that will be at Groves High School on next year as part of that early childhood education program funded through a grant.
And so if you'll go back to the slide with the 3 pathways, because to your point, if we want to put more emphasis on that for local funding, there are 2 additional paths we would have to pursue, right? We would have to de-emphasize something that we've already said is a priority to add more money for pre-K, or we would have to figure out ways to increase revenue, which to Ms. Ball Oliver's point, that could mean going after more philanthropic funding and/or looking at an increased millage rate. So it's a choice and a trade-off. To do more with pre-K means we'll have to do less with something else, or we have to reallocate funding or increase revenue in some shape or form. So that's why these 3 pathways continue to come up, because as you all lift up things that you want to put an emphasis on, this is what we have to keep coming back to every time.
Yeah. So does this number that's in here represent a continuation of the number of students when able to serve, or does it represent a decrease based on the change in the class size?
The number in there includes decreased class size, same amount, of money with the raises for the teachers, but it is, that's
Serving
no
less kids.
extra,
So
no
fewer students.
extra
We would serve less,
classrooms.
fewer students.
Fewer students, less students,
Because of
same
the
number of
class
teachers,
size.
less students.
Ms. Hall and Mr. Moss, are your comments about pre-K?
Yes.
Or something?
Yes.
That's okay. So I got Mr. Moss on pre-K, and then Mr. Johnson has a different line of thought he wanted to follow.
So was there not more money put in the state budget for pre-K this year?
Oh, yes, of course, we put the extra 5.5% as far as for their salaries and benefits, which, we have the
No,
parapros.
that's,
The
no.
state, well, the Bright from the Start may go up on it, but she has not received those. She did not give those, but we went ahead and we cover any additional. See, we're covering anything that it doesn't.
Okay.
The state has not given us more money
No,
for
state
pre-K.
has not.
But the state has
Oh.
said you have to teach fewer kids in the room.
Yes.
Okay, so the
Correct.
state is making it harder to teach
Okay.
pre-K.
All right, all right.
Did you have a pre-K comment, Ms. Hall?
Yes, for Dr. Watts.
Yes.
I wanted to know if we have an intentional group of staff members who are going after these partnerships to make this happen. If we're saying that that's what we're going to do is expand our philanthropic arm, do we have people who are intentionally doing that?
So we have people doing that now. As a part of the reorg, we are, well, it's not adding, because there's always been a grant writer in our org chart. It's just been a vacant position. So we are going to work hard to fill that position so that we can have somebody from sun up to sundown focused on pursuing grants and philanthropic funding.
Now, would that be expanding our partnerships? Is that in that umbrella, or that would be something else?
It would hit us in two areas, because it would be a revenue source, but it would also be a partnership. It would be a relationship, so yes, a partnership.
Okay, so to the public then, our little Acorn academies depend upon
A partnership,
local partnerships.
yes, because it is philanthropically funded.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson?
Real quick, going back to the education of homeless children, is that an increase from the current year, decrease, staying the same?
As far as our budget, it's an increase because of the pay raises.
Okay. And I know it's not broken down, and I know Dr. Watts had said that we're going to get into like the special revenue funds in more detail at a later date. Could we just, for our information, be able to get like a breakdown of increases and decreases in each of them, just like in a spreadsheet or something?
So you're just
Yes.
wanting to add the previous year's revenue and expenditures, because this.
This is, yeah.
This reflects what we are proposing, correct? So you're asking for previous years, so
Well,
you
just
can
the-
see the trend and pattern.
Yes.
Got it.
And we are closing in, so did you have something else, final remarks, Mr. Jackson?
No, I just want to say briefly, the numbers on here are just projections, and it may show an increase due to salary adjustments, but the actual grants themselves, most of the grant funding, we don't find out until the summer, so sometime between July 1st and September, that's when we get the grant awards. So we don't get the true budgets until then, but we can give you the calculations, and what the calculations will show you is our increase based upon what we think the salary changes are going to be. But the true grant awards, we won't get until the summer.
No.
We can show the historical.
Yes, we can do that.
I want to say thank you to all board members, all of your questions. I know we still have more questions. I will reiterate that we've got a different process, a different committee. Board members, please engage each other. And board members, please engage the superintendent and her staff prior to June, and definitely prior to June 20th when we're voting on the budget. Like, engage now. Don't show up at the last minute with engagement saying, why isn't this in the budget? We should have those questions already asked, answered. We might not like the answers, and you can definitely say that on June 20th, but let's not come with new priorities in June, because that doesn't help anybody else. So thank you so much. Our next meeting is May 15th. That is in the morning at 9 a.m. Please look back at those slides for all the other budget meetings that are coming up. We got a bunch of them, so thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor? All opposed?
Okay, guys, we're going to take about a 10-minute break before we get into our governance training.